Travels of the Ellis Arbor is a TTRPG story set in the world of Bastion using the Vagrant Sun campaign setting. Tune in to episode 37, Resistance. Moments later, the corridors erupted with the sounds of whirring arcana, small explosions, and the pained screams of those within. Tucked away in a corridor, Darian, Carpathian, and Edward lie in wait for the perfect opportunity to jump into action. Though ramshackle from the outside, the mill's interior was far more of a square tower. The exterior walls were used as a thoroughfare, lined with lockers and furniture of all kinds. The corners of each sport winding staircases that led to the upper floors. And Edward was certain that should more continue on their trajectory, they'd come skittering down the western hallway toward the group. That would provide ample opportunity to slip away in the ensuing carnage. More rogues were summoned to the playful, cackling waddle of Moore's peregrinations. They continued to evade capture, slipping between legs, hiding behind fallen cupboards, and using the chaos to their advantage. All the while, as their short legs carried them on, a delightful mumble coupled their excited form. Armfuls of food cascaded behind the escaping Myconid as they relished in the rogues' ineptitude. Spinning round the northwest corner, a pair of rogues, armed with hatchets and knives, intercepted Moore's advance. It was plain to see that these weapons had been drawn from the mill's storehouse, mundane and rusted, but more than enough to cut through the Myconid's form. This was the crew's moment to strike. Darian sprung forward, leaping around the closed door and closing the gap between he and the nearest rogue. Pushing the door open a crack, Edward pulled his rifle aloft, aiming roughly toward the further rogue's shoulders. The red gemstone within his magical gun began to spin, and hot flame licked up the sides of the barrel. Carpathian stepped through a portal of his own making, hiding behind the nearest corner and waiting for another opportunity to play mishap with the rogue's magical weapons. It was a simple plan. Edward would strike one, Darian would knock another off their feet, and Carpathian would use magic to bind them to the ground. An ample plan, given their vantage. Nevertheless, it became immediately unnecessary, as the tension suddenly built to a tenuous breaking point. A loud, piercing gunshot from the adjoining interior hall. The scream of a bullet striking the edge of Moore's cap and sending the array of foodstuff hurtling to the floor. It ricocheted off a nearby wall and halted the advance of every other individual in the corridor. Edward and Darian turned their weapons toward the source of the bullet, shocked, stunned, and substantially interested. Holding a long rifle in one hand, a tall, leather-clad rogue. Black hair cropped neatly and oiled away from their face, though a face could barely describe their visage. Covered in a porcelain mask, the villain wore only a vacant expression, as the painted-on eyes gave only a hint of emotion. From the lips down, a rough beard and a callous smile spread across their face. In a flash, the long leather coat blew open, and the crew spied another clue. Black and white checks, lining an ornate, brandish garb. I think that's more than enough excitement for tonight. You two, watch your backs next time. Our guests have been looking for an audience. The hatchet-wielding rogues turned to see the crew of the Ellis Arbor, stalking them from behind. They dropped their weapons and recoiled, realizing they were merely outmatched. Still, the tension continued to build. Perhaps we should take this conversation inside. Ragnar, round up these sabotage weapons. Leave none alone. I wonder if our guests could help us untangle the mystery. Speaking of... The masked character turned to Darian, whose pistol was trained squarely on the expressionless face. They hoisted their weapons over their shoulder and bowed deeply as if to a noble person. Apologies for our lack of decorum. Welcome to the refinery. We've been waiting for the rest of you to gather. You needn't worry about being harmed here. It seems we're compromised after all. I shan't be turning my magical weapons upon you, lest I be burned alive." The figure cackled at their own remark. Thankfully, Mo was barely harmed by the gunshot and began hurriedly collecting their stash of food. One by one, the crew holstered their arms and joined the masked character in the interior of the mill. Walls stacked with boxes and crates, most glimmering for whatever crystal hid inside. The red glowing hearth appeared as a furnace, though much more complicated and elaborate. A stone dais coupled with the red glowing lights and dancing gemstones that hummed with power. A range of tools, weapons, and armaments adorned the chamber as they were invited in. No sooner the remainder of its occupants were whisked away, allowing the group to converse with their unrequited host. "You're all a little difficult to track down. I apologize if we've come across as anything other than interested business people. We run quite a stringent code, and I rarely let others of our kind into the walls of Danae's Mere. No honor among thieves and all that, you know." Darian interjected. "Your allies think otherwise. We've been attacked more than once since our arrival. No less, the only reason we're here at all is because of the disappearance of Edward and more. You clearly don't run a tight ship, friend." "Indeed. I can't apologize on their behalf, of course. But it is not unusual for others to take a stab at leadership. You see, within our merry band, we award impressive acts with higher station. I firmly believe they thought that taking you out of the picture would give them the clout required to improve their station." "And what of magic? I attempted to communicate with these two, but it was unsuccessful. I'm not foolish enough to believe that you aren't intercepting communication for a reason. Explain yourselves before we burn this entire building to..." In a rare occurrence, the figure held up a hand and hushed the hobgoblin's ruthless reply. Yes, you're right. I can see how all appears suspicious and callous. I'm not too haughty to believe that our behavior appears as anything but malign. You don't succeed in this line of work without some ruthless tact. Your failure to communicate would likely have to do with our etheric dampness." He turned his hand toward a stone pillar, sticking around 8 foot from the ground. Lining the surface and swathed in arcana, the silvery crystal drew a strange web, and in the air it pulsed with uneven energy. "We can't have everybody interested in the research we're conducting here." He poured Darian and Carpathian a glass of wine from a silver decanter. For Edward and more, he set a table to enjoy the spoils of what the Myconid had plundered. And to all of them, the roguish figure explained the workings of this inner chamber. "You could say that we're freedom fighters. The last resistance to purge the villainy of Northreach from its shores. No doubt you've seen the piety and the false nobility of the Eladrin whelps. This realm belongs to the people, and we take it upon ourselves to fight as wards on behalf of the free people." Turning over the table, he grabbed at a perfectly cut piece of jade. Even from a few feet away, Darian could feel warmth exuding from it. "Though we can't hope but match the arcane might of the arcane upper class. They are together more powerful than any blight the abyss could belch forth. We've need to shift the odds in our favor, and that is where our mutual friend comes in." He paused, long enough for one of them to interject. "Do you mean to say that Nout has been assisting you on your business?" A smirk appeared from beneath the cold exterior of the porcelain mask. Well, yes. Nout, or as he preferred to be called, Goblin, admirably has skill with magical stones. In exchange for covering his tracks, he's been assisting us with our research. Learning how to draw power from these stones, manipulate them, control them, and even bear them. Do you mean to say that Nout is here? Is he conducting research still? The smirk disappeared from beneath the mask as he clutched the jade crystal all the more firmly. Unfortunately not. We're unable to complete our research before he disappeared. Barely a day ago, in fact. Something must have spooked him, and he set off without a trace. That being said, he did leave a parting gift. A few gifts, in fact. He grabbed a short sword from a nearby crate, drawing it forth from its sheath. The iron of its edge was coated in blackened char, and the leather grip was almost entirely burned away. By my knowledge, your friend was able to alter the enchantments upon many of our weapons. Quite a skilled arsonist. Oh, I'm sorry. Arcanist, by my eye. But arson of this nature begs a deeper question. The smirk turned to a scour, and then to a scowl. Even without eyes, Darian could feel the seething ferocity of their host bearing toward him. Perhaps you could offer insight as to why he might be on the run, and why he saw fit to sabotage our operation. Travels of the Ellis Arbor is made possible by the generous support of our subscribers, followers, and most notably, our patrons. Thanks to all our Moon, Wedge, Crown, and Hex tier patrons for supporting us so far on this journey. Please subscribe, give a like or a comment, follow us on Twitter, and stay tuned for the next episode. Make sure you follow us here on YouTube, on Spotify, and on twitch.tv/lonomy. Don't forget, take care of each other.